Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you joining me here for another week on this episode. Before I get into today's topic, just want to ask a few favors like I do every single week. Please make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. We are on all the major podcast platforms. Subscribe, share it around with any friends that you think might get some benefit from it, because by you doing that, it helps me continue to grow this podcast and hopefully get it out to more people who can find some value just like you on what it is that I am doing here. Jump on, give us a follows on the socials at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram, The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook. You will also be able to find the video versions of this podcast right now going up on YouTube and Facebook. It is a bit of a delay with the video versions. They go up on a Wednesday, whereas the audio version is on a Saturday. So if you want to get the episode as soon as it is released, you need to make sure that you're subscribed on the podcast platform. So Spotify, Apple, Google, all of those great ones that are out there. So this week, title of the episode is Just Start. And seems pretty obvious, right? It's just start, just get going. There's been a lot of times in my life, and there's been a lot of times in the lives of the people that I've coached over the years where I've heard the saying, or I have told myself, hey, I'm really glad that I just got going on that, because I tried to talk myself out of it so many times. And once I got going, once I took that first initial step, once I started to do the first part of my warm-up for a workout or whatever the case might be, like the rest of it just flowed on through. And it's something that I've spoken about on different episodes in different contexts before, where for a lot of people, like just taking that first step is what you're going to need to kickstart you into that behavior. And I'm kind of want to discuss it this week from the point of view of my life. Now, if you've listened to the podcast, you'll know the last 18 months have been somewhat tough from a mental standpoint for myself. After we finished up with the gym, I've kind of found myself in a little bit of a funk. Now, I've had spits and spurts, bits and pieces where I've been motivated to do stuff, and we can go back to the old cliche, like don't wait for motivation to do something. You want to rely on discipline. And don't get me wrong, I've been working, I've been doing actions every day, like I've been trying to move the needle forward, whether it be training's probably actually been one of those things over the last 18 months that hasn't really suffered. If anything, that's one area where it has actually got better. But from the point of view of growing the business, even doing this podcast, there's been times where I've kind of thought about just stopping doing it, just because there is a little bit of time, energy, and effort, and it's like, what's the point? There's been times where I've even thought about giving up coaching, and so it's been tough, and sometimes it's been hard to get momentum going. Sometimes I've felt like I've got a lot of brain fog. I felt really unclear on the direction that I want to do, and that's something that, like, looking on that period, I've kind of gone, all right, like, it's a normal thing to go through that. You want to try and minimize the time that you're going through that as much as possible. But from the human experience side of things, it's a normal thing, I think, as you go through a transition stage in your life, which I have been, going from something that I was doing for a decade plus into now, whatever this new stage of life looks like, the mechanics of what that's going to be. Like, there's got to be a period of almost grieving that I've had to go through. So there's been periods where I've been a bit inconsistent with the action that I've been taking, as much as I've still been doing stuff. And I haven't really sometimes felt like I'm getting anywhere. And that it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy then, right? I'm sure some of you have experienced this, like, it's almost like this quicksand feeling. Now, the one thing I will say, I've spoken about, like, my mental health challenges that I've had, and not that I've been diagnosed, but, like, borderline depression, anxiety, and things like that. That hasn't happened a lot over the last 18 months. It's just been this feeling of, what do I want to do? I'm feeling a little bit lost, like brain fog some days, get a little bit lazy and maybe don't do as much as I could do. And it's just been that kind of thing, right? But over the last couple of weeks, I have been really good. And it's been about 6 weeks now where I've really locked in. I've been getting a lot done, and I've only made one change. And that one change is writing lists. Lists have helped me just get absolutely refocused and get on to what I need to do. And obviously the second part of that, I shouldn't say it's one change, but it's one action that I've been taking. The other thing is just doing what I need to do, what I write down on the list. So if I write a list of things that I'm doing for the day, I need to get those done. And I know it sounds like a really, really simple thing, right? But I'll talk about my experience over the last couple of weeks and how some of the days have gone down. So with these lists that I'm writing of the things that I need to do, I'll write them down the day before. I'll write the night before. So I'll actually sit down at night. I'll do a little bit of now some days I journal, some days I don't. It can be hit and miss with that. But the one thing that I've set out to do is I need to write out my task list for the next day. And then with that, I will just, as soon as I wake up, I will just get to work on the first thing on the list. And I'll just progressively go through and tick off everything that I've written on that list for myself. Now, one area where I would fall down a bit when it would come down to lists over the last 18 months is I would overload myself with things to do. So I would write down 15 things on the list and I would get maybe one or two of them done. And it would take me a bit of time to get through those one or two things. And then I'd kind of get overwhelmed by the whole thing. And I'd just kind of get to, and I'd see that there's still, another 13 things to be done. And I'd just go, oh, fuck it. I'm not going to finish off this today. And I'd get overwhelmed and then I get down and dejected. And it's like, oh, what's the point in doing this? And it'd kind of be that spiral, that self-fulfilling prophecy that I spoke about. And then that feeds into the next day and the next day and the next day. And this is all despite everything that I talk about on the podcast, drawing a line in the sand and getting on with it the next day. This type of stuff affects all of us. It doesn't matter what facade we put out there on social media. It's something that is constantly reoccurring and that we've all got to battle, right? We've all got to really be on our game and try and get back to it. But from the point of view of these lists, right, the thing that I decided to do when I'm I need to start doing this again. I understand that I need to get refocused and I need to get back to it. But I just started off with doing 3 things and not trying to overload. And even though there would be some days where I knew I needed to write more stuff on there, I would actually put the high priority stuff, and some of the stuff would feed into smaller things, but I would only put 3 things on there. And that way, if one of those tasks took me quite a while to get through, there wasn't this long list of 15 different things that I felt like I needed to accomplish that day and it seemed insurmountable. It was oh, there's only 2 more things to do. And even though I might have felt a little bit discouraged, I didn't want to do it, I would just get to the next thing on the list and I would just start it. This is the thing that I have found and even though I've inherently known this, it has been highlighted to me so much over the last 6-week period where I have been super productive. Because it's been on my list, I would just start that thing. And it might be something that's going to take me an hour or less time to do. But every time I would just start it, I would get into this state where I'd just move through it and I'd get it done. And I'd apply myself to the task. But it was always that I'd go through some days where my motivation would be super low. I'd feel tired, I'd feel run down, didn't have a good night's sleep. Maybe I was super sore from training that week. I'm 40, I'm starting to get a little bit old, and I just wouldn't feel like doing it. But the thing that I have noticed so much is that it's on the list. All right, what's the next thing on the list? Right, I've got to do that. I don't really feel like headspace is going, don't really feel like that. Don't really want to do it. No, just do it. Just start. Bang. And I would start it and I would do the first thing. Whether it would be writing notes for the podcast, right? I would just write the title of what I intended for that podcast to do. Next thing I know, 15 minutes later, I've written a whole page of notes. But it all came back to the point that I just needed to start that thing. And the step was I wrote it on my list the night before. You need to write the notes for the podcast. I'd already done something that day, whether it was publish a social media post, send some messages, whatever the case might be. And then the next thing is write some notes for this week's social media, for this week's podcast. Oh, I don't really feel like my brain's fried. I can't really think straight. Okay, just write. What's the title? Today, just start. And then next thing I know, I've written out a whole page of notes and I'm running out of room on the page because everything started going. But the big step that I just did was I just started. And that for me has helped me really navigate that feeling of being lost. It's also I'm starting to feel confident again because I'm actually getting accomplished in what I'm doing. So I'm setting stuff out for myself and I'm ticking it off. So I'm looking at that at the end of the day and I'm accomplishing something. And that in turn helped feed self-confidence, because I did a podcast on this a few weeks ago where it's about keeping your promises to yourself. You've set out these promises, you've kept them. So the next day it's like, hey, I actually got shit done the last day. Now I'm going to do the same thing again. Hey, here's my list. Let's get started on it. Just start. Even though you don't feel like it, you are just starting and you start moving through. And that feeds into that confidence and it feeds into the momentum that you're trying to build for whatever habit you're trying to implement. You are trying to start training, you are trying to build a business. Those little things add up and the little things matter, right? Like those daily actions are going to equate over time to big things and big momentum, but you need to have that consistent action to do it. But the big thing, and probably so for those of you that are maybe feeling a little bit lost, a little bit brain fog, and you've got these goals that you want to achieve, but you're kind of not really sure. The big game changer for me this time around was two things. One, start off small with the list. Start off, the whole goal of writing that list for you in that first 2 weeks needs to be about building momentum and helping build that sense of accomplishment. So write 2 to 3 things on the list each day and just set to get those done. Now, there's going to be other things outside of that list that you have to get done. If you've got a 9-to-5 job, you may not write that on the list. You may actually have a separate list for your job, but I'm talking about maybe things outside of the 9-to-5 job that you want to, if you do want to, maybe you want to grow a side business or maybe you want to implement training, write 2 to 3 things on there. And one of those might be just show up to work and be present at work. That may be one. So at the end of the day, you can tick that off. Number 2, do some form of movement each day. So you go for a 30-minute walk. Number 3, journal, whatever. I'm not here to tell you what those actions should be, but I'm just kind of giving you the tools and the framework that you can use. So you've put 3 things on there, and maybe it's the same 3 things every day for 2 weeks, but your goal is just to get those ticked off, and that's where you start. And then once you've done that, once you've started to build that momentum, and maybe you start to see, hey, I've got a bit more time to do some other things, so then I can start writing other things on there. I will write things like, be present when I'm playing with my kids, because I know I've got an hour etched out where it's just going to be me and the family, and it's like, tools down, don't do any other work, I am here, I am doing that. That's a task for me for the day. And while it seems very regimented, the feeling of accomplishment and the level of presence you can have when you are able to go, no, this is something I have to prioritize because it's on my list, really helps you be in the moment and be with them and kind of discard the other stuff, because it's like, hey, I know, I've prioritized this, I've written it down, and I know that this is what I've set out to do. So no task that you write on there is too minuscule in the beginning. There's going to be things that, as I said, you're going to have to do every day and you will do no matter what. Maybe you don't put them on your list. Maybe you put things that you want to change, or maybe you do. Maybe just to start the habit of writing the list and ticking things off, you put those things on there that you are going to do every day. So that's what I would do if I was starting out, and that's what I had to do this time around, because otherwise what I would do is I would just write too much stuff on there. It would get too overwhelming, and while I'd get some stuff done, it would feed into a negative mental mindset that wouldn't really help me feel better about where I was moving in the direction that I was moving. And I was actually finding I was getting less stuff done as a result. So start off small and then build from there. And have these things around your situation. As I said, again, and I know I've said this a few times now, but For some of you, you may just write a list of the things you know you have to do each day, just to start to get into the habit of it. And maybe you write 2 things you know you have to do and 1 new thing. And that 1 new thing is the thing on your list that you're going to look to tick off for the day. But the other 2 things, by writing them on your list, what I've actually found is for things that I know that I'm doing, I'm a little bit more present, accountable, and efficient with that thing that I'm trying to do, just because it's there, it's giving me, I'm putting it kind of out to, without sounding too corny, the universe, that I am committing to doing this thing and I'm committing to doing it well. So don't overcomplicate it. Write down that list, keep it small to begin with, and then if there's something on there that you don't feel like doing, you get in that negative headspace of, hey, I just can't do this, just start it. Just write the first sentence, take the first step, put the shoes on to go to the gym, get in the car, whatever the case might be, just start that task, because I can almost guarantee you, for most of you, once you just take that first step, the rest will start to flow on from there. So just start, just get going. Whatever it is, you need to just get going on it, and you need to just get moving, because it will help feed your self-confidence. It will help release you from that brain fog that you feel some days. And the biggest tool that I have found that has kind of helped me kickstart this momentum I've been seeing over the last 6 weeks has been writing lists for myself the night before. If you're starting to do that for the first time, start off small and then grow from there. They would be my tips to you for this week, but just start. You can do it. Regardless of where you're at right now, I just want to let you know that even though I may not know you personally, sometimes you got to give yourself a pat on the back and tell yourself that you're doing a good job, because as a dad, as a husband, as a father, I know sometimes I can be too hard on myself, and that can be a blessing and a curse. It can be a blessing because it propels me to want to do better things, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But sometimes we just need to know that we're doing a good job. So if you're listening to this and you've got all the way to the end of the podcast, you're doing a great job. Keep pushing forward, keep trying to be better, and do the right thing for you and your family, and take what's useful and discard what's not. Take care. Have a great week. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.